With that, let's get to a highlight video breakdown here of game 109-110 on Friday night between BYU and Houston. Total on this game, 62.5 to 63. Side now BYU -5. And joined by Kyle Hunter, professional handicapper and bettor from huntersportspicks.com. This has been a game that's gotten a lot of line movement already this week. It was BYU 4.5 down to 3. Now BYU back up to 5. Somebody with some pretty big influence has hit both sides of this game already.
Yeah, this is an interesting handicap. If you look at this game, BYU had been so good for many games in a row, and then they play one poor game against UTSA. So what do we want to say? Do we want to say that was a bad spot, a sleepy spot for them, or do we want to say that BYU was overvalued? You know, it is fair to say BYU hasn't exactly played a murderer's row of opponents so far this year. So, you know, this is Navy is not nearly as good as what we thought they would be. And then, you know, Troy, not a great team by any means, also in a bad spot. Louisiana Tech traveling out there is not a good spot either for them. So I think that BYU, if you look at their stats, you would wonder why this number is what it is. You know, to me, this number is still a little bit too light. BYU is plus 3.36 yards per play. So that's first in the nation in yards per play margin so far this year. It's funny who's second. Houston's second, but Houston's played one game. They stuffed Tulane pretty well in that game. The 31 points by Tulane were very misleading. I do think, though, that, you know, you only have one data point to go off of for this Houston team. Do we want to assume that the Houston defense is really good just because they did well against Tulane? I don't think so. I've really been impressed with Zach Wilson so far this year for BYU. I know I said before the season I wasn't even sure he was their best quarterback. Maybe he is. I will say BYU has some really good quarterbacks, excellent depth there, very good options. BYU's receivers have played better than I thought they would. They've really been good in the passing game. I think they can throw the ball here on Houston. I think both teams score a decent amount of points here. I think BYU will try to play slower and doesn't really want to get into one of those real high-scoring games here. Houston would love to have a high-scoring game. I am a bit concerned for Houston that Clayton Tune does seem to have trouble with the football. You know, he makes some bad decisions with the football. I think he'll be in some bad spots here because the offensive line's not very good. He's going to get sacked a lot. BYU is going to bring some pressure. Houston, to me, it's a risk that they could be negative in the turnover margin again this week, and they're not going to be able to get away with being -4 in turnover margin and beating somebody badly as they did against Tulane. So, you know, this is one where I don't think that Houston is going to continue to be able to do that. I think Houston will move the football. Holgerson's a really good offensive mind. Houston has good skill position talent. I just think BYU is the much more complete team. So BYU plays one bad game last week. Then they go out. The marketplace goes against them, gets the number down to 3, and then the market comes in and takes BYU -3. My number is bigger than what the number is right now, so I still lean to BYU here in this game. I don't think that Houston has done enough to show me that I'd want to bet on them here.
Well, and that was the thing, you know, for basically 3 weeks in a row, I was chasing BYU numbers. I was chasing my power rating on BYU. And now I have this game lined at 8. So I do have a pretty big overlay from the market. You know, obviously at -3, it certainly looked very good. At 5, it's still not a bad play to take. As you mentioned, you know, we've got one data point for Houston, and it was a very strange game. I know they did everything they wanted offensively except take care of the football and hung 49 points. One of the most incredible box scores that you're going to see. But I think it's a really important point that you made. And if you've listened to the full edition of this podcast, and you certainly should here on ATS Radio, we've talked about how we've moved down Tulane. We've moved down La Tech. We've moved Navy around. These two teams, of their data points, the teams that they played either aren't as good as we expected them to be or are worse than we thought they would be. So this is a step up in class both ways here for both of these teams. The difference is I think a BYU team that's been playing probably has a much better chance of looking crisper than Houston does, just because they have played. I think their defense should play better than Houston's defense will. Again, I think BYU is the play here. Hopefully you got in at 3 or 3.5 or 4, something like that. But like I said, I don't think 5 is a bad number to take relative to where I have this line at -8.
61% of the bets so far on BYU, 80% of the money is on BYU. And as far as the total, 52% of the bets on the over, 90% of the money on the over. So somebody likes the over here too. I'm pretty neutral on this total. I think it's about right. Houston totals are ones that I'd rather play overs with, but BYU, I don't see as being a good team to bet really high overs with. I think they're going to play too slow for that. Sataki, not really a guy that wants to get into those 35 to 31 type games unless he really has to.
We'll be doing these shows and our highlight videos with Kyle Hunter on Wednesdays now on ATS Radio, making a change to the schedule here. But if you subscribe to ATS Radio on Spreaker, Stitcher, Spotify, iTunes, iHeartRadio, Google Podcasts, SoundCloud, wherever you stream and download your podcast content, you're guaranteed to get the shows no matter when we do them. So we encourage you to do that, to check out our ATS YouTube, and of course to go over to ATS.io and check out all of the content that we have posted over there.